The moment the bell shrilled for first period at Northwood Academy, it was less an invitation to learn and more a signal for bedlam. For Lena Petrova, however, it felt like walking into a gladiator arena armed only with a hopeful smile. At 27, she was the freshest face on the teaching staff at this notoriously challenging public institution, a place where locker art was more sophisticated than some lesson plans, and students viewed rules as mere suggestions. Lena, with her piercing blue eyes, a cascade of raven black hair, and an attire that whispered understated elegance with an edge, stepped into room 301. Her quiet composure momentarily silenced the 28 teenagers who were assessing her like a new exhibit at the zoo. A pause that lasted all of 7 seconds. The classroom itself was a testament to neglect. Desks scarred with generations of carvings, fluorescent lights that buzzed and flickered erratically. She placed her worn leather briefcase on the teacher's desk, her slight smile unwavering, and wrote Ms. Petrova on the dusty whiteboard. The murmurs began almost instantly. "Looks like she got lost on her way to a college lecture," one student quipped. "I give her till Friday," another snorted from the back row where Rex, the king, Donovan, and his cronies held court. Rex, a hulking senior with a shaved head, a perpetual air of defiance, and a history of administrative write-ups, exchanged knowing grins with his crew. He leaned back, arms folded, already mentally cataloging ways to turn this new teacher's tenure into a brief, unpleasant memory. Lena, seemingly oblivious to the undercurrents of rebellion, launched into her lecture on the Odyssey, her voice clear and engaging, as if she genuinely believed every student was captivated by tales of ancient heroes. She didn't appear to notice the spitball that whizzed past her ear, nor the muffled giggles when it splattered against her meticulously arranged syllabus copies. Rex Donovan was the undisputed alpha of room 301. A fixture at Northwood since his freshman year, by his senior year, he had elevated classroom disruption to an art form. Clad in a battered denim jacket that served as his armor, he commanded unwavering allegiance from his inner circle. Sketch, a lanky youth with a nervous laugh and a talent for shockingly accurate caricatures. Viper, whose venomous remarks could silence anyone. And Tank, a silent monolith who followed Rex's commands without a flicker of hesitation. This quartet had successfully driven off 3 substitute teachers the previous semester alone. One resigned after just 3 days, another fled after a particularly inventive incident involving a fire alarm and a bucket of blue paint. Rex viewed Lena as just another temporary obstacle. Young, likely inexperienced, and far too polished to be taken seriously. "She'll crumble like a stale cookie," he muttered to Sketch, who chuckled and immediately began a new, unflattering drawing of Miss Petrova. Viper, tossing her vibrant pink hair, chimed in, "Let's see how many days until she's sobbing in the principal's office." Tank merely grunted, his gaze fixed on Lena as she spoke passionately about Odysseus's cunning. Their strategy was straightforward. Begin with minor annoyances, probe her breaking point, and then escalate until she inevitably cracked. Rex launched a carefully folded paper dart towards the whiteboard. It narrowly missed Lena's head. She didn't even blink, continuing her discussion on the theme of perseverance in the epic. A ripple of mixed annoyance and grudging admiration went through the class. Rex, unfazed, leaned toward Sketch. "The next one gets closer," he hissed. Lena Petrova was no fool. She'd grown up in an inner-city neighborhood not dissimilar to the one surrounding Northwood, where astuteness was a survival skill. She'd identified his crew the second she entered. Sketch's restless energy, Viper's disdainful sneers, Tank's stoic obedience. She knew this was a test, and she was more than prepared. Not just because of her stellar academic record in pedagogy, but because Lena Petrova harbored a resilience forged in fires Northwood Academy couldn't fathom. She'd spent her late teens volunteering at a youth crisis center, mediating disputes and de-escalating situations far more volatile than a high school classroom. She'd once, at 19, calmly faced down a local gang member trying to intimidate her volunteers. That same unwavering resolve still simmered beneath her silk blouses and composed demeanor. So, when a second paper dart, this one adorned with a crude drawing of a crying stick figure labeled Teacher, landed directly on her shoulder, she didn't react as Rex anticipated. No shouting, no blushing, no stammering. Instead, she paused her sentence, picked up the dart, and unfolded it with the unhurried precision of a watchmaker. Inside, the drawing was accompanied by a scrawled message, "Go home, teach, earn not wanted." The class held its breath, anticipating an outburst. Lena simply smiled, a dangerous glint in her blue eyes that Rex failed to register. "Anatomically interesting," she commented, holding up the paper. "But if you're going to express artistic sentiment, at least use correct grammar. It's your, as in you are." A wave of laughter, surprised and genuine, swept the room. Rex's smirk wavered. The remainder of the period transformed into a strategic duel. Rex's crew intensified their efforts. Sketch accidentally sent his heavy history textbook crashing to the floor with a deafening boom. Viper posed an intentionally obtuse question about whether Penelope really waited for Odysseus. Tank developed a series of loud hacking coughs precisely when Lena turned her back. Lena navigated each disruption with unnerving poise. She addressed Viper's question with a nuanced analysis of loyalty and societal expectations in ancient Greece, turning it into an impromptu mini-lecture that left Viper momentarily stunned. When Sketch's book thudded, Lena calmly walked over, picked it up, and handed it back with a look that conveyed, "I'm on to you." For Tank's coughing fits, she offered him a lozenge from her briefcase with such exaggerated concern that even he looked embarrassed. The other students, sensing a shift in the usual dynamic, began to engage. Lena's lesson was no longer just about the Odyssey. It was a masterclass in composure. As the bell rang, Rex was practically vibrating with suppressed rage. She hadn't broken. Worse, she'd subtly outmaneuvered him without even raising her voice. As the students filed out, he growled to his crew, "Tomorrow, we bring the thunder." Day 2 marked the planned escalation. Rex had coordinated with his crew via late-night texts, devising a prank designed to etch his name into Northwood legend. The concept was simple yet malicious. A chair leg meticulously coated with industrial-strength superglue, timed for when Lena would lean back, coupled with an embarrassing meme photoshopped with Lena's face, printed and ready to be slipped onto her desk for maximum humiliation. Sketch had expertly crafted the meme, Viper had sourced the glue, and Tank was responsible for the discreet application during the morning rush. By the time Lena entered room 301, the stage was set. She wore a charcoal gray pantsuit, her raven hair secured in a sleek bun, appearing every inch the consummate professional, though faint shadows under her eyes hinted at a late night of preparation. The classroom was eerily quiet, a palpable tension hanging in the air. Rex leaned back, a triumphant smirk playing on his lips as Lena approached her desk. She set down her briefcase, glanced at her notes, and then, as if about to ponder a student's question, she made to lean back. A collective gasp, then a mixture of nervous snickers and outright guffaws erupted as the chair, now adhered to the floor on one side, tilted precariously, forcing Lena to catch herself on the desk to avoid a fall. Rex's crew exchanged victorious glances. Lena stood there for a moment, her expression unreadable. Then, to everyone's astonishment, she chuckled, not a nervous titter, but a genuine, hearty laugh that resonated through the room. "Well," she said, steadying the chair with a hand, "that was certainly an adhesive situation. Points for commitment, I suppose. The laughter in the room faltered, morphing into bewildered silence. Lena didn't yell, didn't storm out. Instead, she retrieved a small toolkit from her briefcase. How did she even have that? And began expertly working to unstick the chair. "Let's discuss ingenuity," she announced, her voice calm but with an undeniable steely undertone. Because whoever orchestrated this demonstrated planning, execution, and teamwork. That's raw talent. Misapplied, perhaps, but talent nonetheless. She finally freed the chair, then picked up the meme printout from her desk. Rex's bravado began to curdle into unease. She held it up, examining the photoshopped image with mock seriousness. Ah, a visual commentary. Quite avant-garde. The pixelation is a bit blurry, though. Sketch, your usual work is much crisper. Did you rush this? Sketch froze, his face flushing crimson. Before he could stammer a denial, Lena addressed the class. "Here's the fundamental flaw with pranks like these," she stated, her gaze sweeping the room. "They're only truly effective if the prankster is significantly more clever than the target. And frankly, I'm not convinced that's the case here." That's when Rex blundered. He couldn't tolerate being outmaneuvered, not in front of his followers, not before the entire class. He surged to his feet, his large frame casting a shadow over his desk. "You think you're so smart, new lady?" he sneered. "You're just another temp with a fancy diploma. Sit down and teach your boring myths." The room fell deathly silent. Even his crew looked apprehensive. Lena didn't recoil. She walked purposefully towards Rex, her sensible heels clicking on the linoleum, until she stood directly before him. She was considerably shorter, yet her posture, her unwavering gaze, made him feel like the smaller one. "Rex Donovan," she said, her voice quiet but firm, "I understand your archetype. You believe you control this space through volume and intimidation because you assume people are afraid. But you're not intimidating, Rex. You're transparent." She leaned in ever so slightly, and he involuntarily flinched. "And I am not your temp. I am your teacher. So here's your choice. You can persist in these juvenile attempts to provoke me, or you can sit down, engage with the material, and perhaps learn something. Decide quickly, because my patience for theatrics is exhausted." The class was transfixed, eyes flicking between Rex and Lena. Rex's jaw tightened, his hands balled into fists. He desperately wanted to retaliate, to unleash a cutting remark, but her eyes, those sharp, unyielding blue eyes, held him captive. He'd never been confronted so directly, so calmly, by any authority figure. Then, Lena did the one thing that shattered his composure. She turned her back on him, dismissing him as inconsequential, and picked up her copy of the Odyssey. "Page 62, she announced to the class. "Let's examine the concept of hubris." Rex sank into his chair, his face burning with humiliation. His crew remained silent. Viper whispered, "What in the world just happened?" Sketch stared intently at his desk, avoiding Lena's gaze. Tank shifted uncomfortably, his allegiance visibly shaken. The grand prank had spectacularly imploded, and Lena hadn't raised her voice, hadn't sent anyone to the principal. She had won, decisively and effortlessly. The next 60 seconds felt like an eternity. Rex, still reeling, tried to salvage a shred of his shattered dominance. He muttered under his breath, just loud enough for the class to perceive, "This isn't finished, Teach." Lena paused her writing on the board, turned, and fixed him with a look that could have chipped stone. "Oh, but it is, Rex," she declared, "unless you'd prefer to articulate to Principal Matthews why you're squandering everyone's educational time. Or perhaps you'd rather explain it to me, right now." She took a step closer, her voice dropping to a near whisper. "I volunteered in neighborhoods far rougher than the streets around Northwood, kid. I've dealt with individuals who make your tough guy act look like amateur hour, and I'm still standing. So, what's your next move? Are you going to keep digging this hole, or are you going to try aspiring to be something more than a predictable cliché? The classroom was utterly silent, the air thick with an unspoken dare. Rex's bravado crumbled. He glanced at his crew for support, but they avoided his eyes. Sketch was doodling with frantic intensity. Viper was meticulously examining her fingernails, and Tank just stared at the floorboards. Rex's shoulders sagged. "Sorry," he mumbled, the word barely audible. Lena arched an eyebrow. "Louder." He cleared his throat, his face a deep shade of crimson. "I'm sorry, Miss Petrova." The words were extracted as if by force. His crew mumbled their own apologies, their voices subdued and defeated. Lena offered no triumphant smirk. She simply nodded, turned back to the whiteboard, and resumed her lesson as if the confrontation had been a minor interruption. The class was now utterly captivated, not by Odysseus, but by her. She had faced down Room 301's worst, superglue, memes, open defiance, and transformed it into an impromptu lecture on self-possession. By the period's end, students were genuinely raising their hands, posing questions about heroes and monsters, drawn in by Lena's evident passion and unshakable composure. Rex remained silent, but his gaze followed her, a new, perplexing mixture of resentment and nascent respect. His crew, too, was uncharacteristically subdued, their usual swagger extinguished. When the bell rang, Lena called out, "Rex, Sketch, Viper, Tank, please remain for a moment." The four froze, bracing for detentions or worse. The rest of the class scurried out, buzzing about the unexpected showdown. Lena waited until the room was empty, then perched on the edge of her desk, regarding them. "You all possess considerable potential," she stated, "but you're squandering it on these petty power plays. If you want to be leaders, then lead with something more substantial than pranks and posturing. I'll be here all academic year. You decide the narrative from this point forward." She dismissed them with a curt nod, and they shuffled out, heads bowed, no longer the indomitable force they had been just an hour prior. News of the incident spread like wildfire. By lunchtime, the entire school was abuzz about the new teacher who had dismantled Rex Donovan's reign without so much as raising her voice. Students from other classes grew curious about this Ms. Petrova, who clearly didn't subscribe to the standard teaching playbook. In the staff lounge, teachers exchanged anecdotes, some skeptical, others quietly impressed. Lena, meanwhile, ate her salad, grading essays, her pantsuit still bearing a faint chemical odor from the glue, but her smile serene and intact. She wasn't naive. She knew Rex and his crew might test her again. That respect at Northwood wasn't granted, only earned. But she had established a precedent. She had demonstrated she wasn't just a charming 27-year-old with an impressive CV. She was a force molded in crucibles tougher than they could comprehend. And she was unequivocally here to stay. The bullies had targeted the wrong teacher, and in a single, decisive minute, she had flipped their entire script. They weren't just murmuring apologies, they were fundamentally reassessing everything they believed about power. Over the ensuing weeks, Room 301 underwent a subtle metamorphosis. Rex never became Lena's biggest fan, but his open challenges ceased, replaced by a grudging, watchful deference. Sketch began submitting his assignments, his doodles now often clever illustrations related to class topics. Viper's sharp retort softened, her questions in class becoming more thoughtful and genuine. Tank, the quiet enforcer, astonished everyone by composing a surprisingly insightful essay on the burdens of leadership, earning him his first A in high school. Lena didn't patronize or single them out. She taught, she listened, she challenged. She invited guest speakers, orchestrated lively debates, and even allowed the class to select the novel for their subsequent unit. Northwood Academy was no utopia. Skirmishes still erupted, and new graffiti still appeared on bathroom walls. But Lena Petrova's classroom became an unlikely sanctuary.
Students who had previously shunned books began to read voraciously. Those who had felt invisible started to find their voices. And Lena, with her sharp intellect and unwavering calm, became a quiet legend, not for her youth or her style, but because she had walked into the lion's den and, with quiet authority, made the lion sit down.